Our next speaker is Mr. Vijay Dhasmana. He is founder of the Rewilders and curator of Aravali Biodiversity Park, an eco-restoration practitioner with over 15 years of rewilding work in the Aravali landscape. Vijay Dhasmana is an eco-restoration and rewilding practitioner with over 11 years of hands-on intense rewilding work in the Aravali landscape. He has undertaken several rewilding projects in Gurgaon, Rajasthan, Uttarakhand, and Delhi. Earlier, he has been working in the field of forest conservation since late 1990s. He founded the Rewilders to collaborate on ecological restoration projects. Today, his topic of presentation is Rewilding, a mining site into Aravali Forest, Gurgaon Aravali Biodiversity Park. Welcome you, sir.
Thank you very much for inviting me. And what wonderful presentations. Thank you. And to be privy to such presentations. So this is a story of, there is so much learning from what Aparna ji is doing in Panchgani, and before that on Pardis and how to get Pardis, the knowledge they have. I have had the opportunity to work with Pardis in my previous job, and it was wonderful to know their knowledge about the wildscapes and the wildlife. This is a story of a mined area of about 380 acres in the Aravalis. Aravalis hills, these are, this particular outcrop is between Delhi and Gurgaon. And if you look at the larger landscape, this is if there was a possibility of connecting, through this highway, which is a Mehrauli-Gurgaon highway, we could connect this particular park to Damdama and perhaps to Sariska Tiger Reserve. Now, if you can see, there is huge urbanization over time that has happened in this larger landscape. And it's very, very urban area. The Haryana government is also thinking of 3 large cities next to the city of Gurgaon. So this was the 380 acres, which was mined for quartzite and Badarpur. Badarpur is the quartzite sand. And there were stone crushers, about 8 stone crushers. So they would bring the rocks from the mines and then crush it and provide the grits for the construction work. This was the landscape that I saw in the park in 2010. 2009 is when the municipality was formed, and 2010 was when they thought of creating this into a urban park. Somebody called Atal Kapoor, who is no more with us, was instrumental in getting this area demarked as a park. The land got saved because of a Supreme Court ruling. This was the MC Mehta case, the famous MC Mehta case on Aravalis. And 2004 was when the mining was stopped and stone crushing was stopped in this particular area. And in 2009, when municipality formed, they decided all the common lands became part of the municipality. Now, if you look at the landscape, what you saw in 2010, mostly what we saw was young shrubs of Prosopis juliflora, a few of Acacia tortilis, a few of Acacia nilotica as well, and Balanitis roxburghii. Now, in terms of grasses, you saw wherever there was a possibility of moisture, you could see Saccharum bengalens. On the dry hills, bare rocks, you could see some bit of Chrysopogon, Heteropogon, and Aristida species. In terms of shrubs, we saw lantana, major lantana, and also bushes of Ziziphus namillaria, Caparis ciparia, a few bushes of even Caparis decidua, and a couple of plants of Flugia leucopyrus. As I mentioned, so this is just to give a sense of the landscape that I saw in 2010. In 2011, there was a group of people called as I Am Gurgaon. They volunteered to, enable this landscape to be converted into a park. And many landscape architects, such as Savita Punde to Kavita, to, they made a consortium of people who were looking at designing this particular place. And in my understanding, what they did was a very complex design of experiences, and they wanted to give lots of experience to the visitors in this 380 acres, from herbal gardens to forest experience to medicinal plants and butterfly gardens, and many other feature-led park. Now, a little bit on Aravali's. I don't know if many people know about Aravali's. This is one of the oldest fold mountains, extends all the way from Delhi to Gujarat. Long range, very, very important. Ecologically, it protects your central Indian forests and the Gangetic Plain from desertification. It's not spectacular in terms of floral diversity, but it is remarkable in what it has. The rainfall in the northern part of Aravali is about 400 to 600 mm, as was mentioned by Mr. Menon in his presentation. This is also, of that kind of rainfall. When you go into the central and the southern Aravali, the rainfall increases and you see much more diversity. And when you reach Mount Abu, the diversity is at its peak. Here is a map on where the Aravalis are found, the different districts that you find Aravalis, and you have some spectacular forests in the belts of Udaipur and Pratapgarh. This is to give you a profile of Aravalis. This is in Sariska. On the top, you can see quartzite rocks sitting on sandstone. The middle layer is sandstone, and then on the extreme base is our Indian craton of banded gneissic complex. And here you can see the profile of jungles that you see on the Sariska landscape. Our inspiration was, some of the forests in and around Gurgaon, which was Mangarbani. Central Ridge of Delhi had some beautiful patches of Mitragaina and Anogesis pendula. The forest here in this particular patch of Mangarbani is dominated by Anogesis pendula, and you can find some clumps of some patches of Boswellia serrata, the Indian frankincense tree. We also took inspiration from Sariska and also from Jeer forests. Now, this is how our forests look when they are dry and where there is moisture. So you'll find, mostly dhok dhok is the Anogesis pendula, reaching at the base of the valleys. And in the valley, you'll find some richness of, Mitragainas and Adinas species. This is again from Mangarbani, which is a very, very important special forest for all of us in Delhi NCR. This is from Jhalana, and you can see the Boswellia patch here. This is how our forests look generally. And in the valleys, in the dry valleys, you'll find Butia-dominated forests with many, many associations. And where in the Aravalis, especially in the northern Aravalis, you'll find piling up of sand that happens on the southern western edge. And here the plant palette changes, and you get more xerophytic plant species, more of Thar and Middle East or Arabian peninsular plant species. Very rich, very spectacular. I'm fortunate to be working in one of that landscape as well. Now, when, as I was mentioning, people were working, there was a consortium of architects and landscape architects who were designing it, and they have made some interesting plans for the 380 acres. So when they invited me onto the project, I think I was not sure what they wanted me to do, but I started questioning the project, and I asked them, who is going to run this project? Who is going to, and I Am Gurgaon didn't have the till then they were just volunteers. They were wanting to just enable municipality to work on creating this urban space or a garden space. Then we realized it's basically the municipality that who's going to run this place. So in my mind and in my experience of Sundar Nursery and various other projects, these are high-end gardens are not necessarily easy to maintain for municipalities. It may be good for a private enterprise, but not necessary for public spaces. It often goes into degradation, and the character loses its over time. So I started questioning the team and kind of said, you have a large swathe of land, which is 380 acres. Why don't we think differently? Why don't we, make it more, make a statement, Gurgaon, which represents something which is a hub for commercial activities, world over. You have top companies operating from Gurgaon. You have young people who have explored the world and working here in Gurgaon. You have many people who have settled back into Gurgaon from around the world, working in the world and then coming back. Why don't we together make a statement for the city, which is representing basically extraction, that we are bringing back the forests of Aravali's. So it took a little bit of time for them to understand what it means. I took the team to Mangarbani. I think many of them had gone for the first time to Mangarbani. And they were stunned by the beauty of Mangarbani, that, yes, it is lovely. And slowly we tweaked the vision from the city multi-feature park into a city forest. Recreational spaces, yes, of course, a space which is recreational. You had to redefine recreation. I think that we will address in question and answer session, because recreation itself is a word that can be explored and evolved with time. And of course, it, as a water recharge zone, because Gurgaon extracts 3 times more water than goes into the ground, and has a very, very depleting groundwater table. This is an artist's representation of the park as we had thought. This is by Golak. And we created certain forest patches in the rocky outcrop. In the valleys, we had certain other kinds of forest patches. We left few grasslands that were possible. Now, the land use of this land was mainly because it was mined, and you can see several pits in the landscape. There was some grazing happening. So we negotiated with the villagers, which is a very, very rich village called Nathudpur, negotiated with them that we'll open one part of the park and rest will close for grazing. And that worked with lots of ups and downs. We can go into the details in question and answer session. And we restricted movement of cattle and grass cutting into one half of the park. This is one of the collaterals where we announced that we are bringing back the forests. First step in a mined landscape, at least in Delhi NCR, where the landscapes are dominated by Prosopis juliflora, if you don't bring in the right species, Prosopis, lantana or Acacia tortilis will dominate the landscape. It will colonize the landscape. So you had to bring in the right species, and it was a project of active restoration. So we created a nursery and we started growing plants in the nursery bit by bit. Till 2018, we had already added 150 odd species into the landscapes, into the landscape, which included herbaceous and grasses as well. So massive operation of seed collection from the northern Aravalis, and then planting them out. Now, just to go back, IIM Gurgaon made an arrangement with municipality, and municipality signed them for 8 years to do the restoration work. Now, what happened was that IIM Gurgaon got the city involved in restoration work. So we would dig the pits, we would place the plants, how we wanted the habitat to be, and get the children, corporates, volunteers, individuals to come and plant in certain parts of the monsoon season, maybe 2-3 days in a year. And before they would do that, we would educate them on the native species, try to sensitize them from children to corporate volunteers. And as of today, it has become somewhat close to what we had imagined, and we have certain forest patches. I'll show you some pictures. We have yet to get into interpretation of the landscape, which we are going to undertake now in the second phase. Now the Hero Murkoff has taken the trusteeship of the park in terms of sponsoring the interpretation work and some programs for the citizen. These are some before and after pictures. This is 2010. You can see seasonal water body, and you can see the larger landscape, which is dominated by Prosopis juliflora. This is in between 2016, how grasses have kind of dominated the landscape. And then you will see the Anogeissus pendula on the far end and some other communities. There's another mining pit here. You can see, again, has Prosopis taking over. You can see other community of plants coming up. This is another pit that was dug out for, and you can see on the hilltop now we have Anogeissus pendula forest and Boswellia on the brow of the hill. And in the valleys where the water stays, you have Acacia nilotica and some Mithragana. This is the city of Gurgaon from the park, and on the left you have amphitheater where there are two events happen every year. This is Titar Chowk, which is now transformed. So in terms of diversity of fauna, we have bird species reported 201 bird species as of now. When we started, we had a count of maybe about 80. We have good reptile population, animals, mammals. We have about 14 odd mammal species. This is Misha Bansal, who did her master's her master's thesis on the diversity and population studies and comparing it with the unrestored area, which showed huge difference between a restored and an unrestored area. We have good plant diversity now. We have added close to, if you count other than the invasives, we would have about 300 odd species of plants. And you have now, recruitment of seedlings from those forest patches of Boswellias and pendula, Acacia, Anogeissus pendula. And this is how the landscape looks now. So this is the recruitment photograph. It has become an educational space, and people enjoy learning about plants here, birding here, and also just to spend time volunteering or looking at how a young Anogeissus pendula forest looks. So this is a saccharum patch. If I have time, I can show you a small clip, if you can get an audio.
Can you increase the volume, sir?
Up until 2010, the area was a degraded wasteland. Most vegetation
Yeah, perfect.
species. Almost no trees that once grew here were left. Abandoned pits and crusher sheds were telling signs of how mining had ravaged the terrain. Then around 2009, things started to change.
A barren, abandoned stone quarry has now become a living forest.
NGOs like I Am Gurgaon work with the Municipal Corporation of Gurgaon to revive the barren land. After detailed research on the kind of trees that Aravali once had, multiple species sourced from different areas were planted here. Today, a nursery grows saplings of native trees to keep adding to this growing forest.
I have been working in this park, Aravali Biodiversity Park, for last 8 years now. We've added close to 200 species of plants in this park. And today it has become a habitat for birds, lots of animals, and people. A lot of people come here every day to experience the wilderness.
I come here to de-stress, to relax, to get my mojo back.
My most biggest factor to come here is to spot wild animals. I've seen many such as rabbit, peacocks, nilgai, deers.
Living close to the forest means fresh air.
ये ऐसी जगह है जहाँ पे हम आके सांस ले सकते हैं।
हम दोस्तों के साथ यहाँ पे खेलने आते हैं। यहाँ पे हमको बहुत अच्छा लगता है।
I'm a runner. I find beautiful trails to walk on and beautiful mud trails to run.
यहाँ पर मतलब बहुत हरियाली है।
I am Gurgaon head citizen volunteer in reviving the Aravali Biodiversity Park. Corporates pitched in and the Municipal Corporation of Gurgaon actively supported this initiative.
It's still possible if we get together to work along with the government, along with the authorities, to actually create something.
Today, the Aravali Biodiversity Park is a green haven for all citizens to enjoy.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
So now it has been declared as a OACM site in this during this wetland day. So we can go into question and answer. I think I have said what I had to say.
Yes, sir. Bilay Menon says, very happy to see how the project is evolving. Congratulations to Vijay and team. Atal Kapoor was his friend. Aravallis is arguably one of the oldest ranges in the world, and its conservation is important in various fronts, from the perspectives of climate change, global warming, conservation of soil geology, groundwater, vegetation, etc., and would be a major leap in reducing carbon emissions. Madhu Reddy says this gives hope for other mining areas and the restoration. Aparna Vatwe says, what an amazing place, Vijay sir, beautiful outcrop forest. So
Thank you.
more of comments from the participants and speakers.
Yeah, we had our share of challenges. I mean, if anybody wants to ask those questions, it will be nice to share that. There was a highway that is planned through the park, and the citizen of Gurgaon fought against that highway. And I think there was a growing demand to remove that highway from the plan. And now that OACM status has been given to the park, I think the planners will think differently.
Yeah, Piyush Seksaria sir asked, how was your work influenced folks like the forest department? Also, how has this work influenced other restoration sites and groups?
So I think forest department has been very sympathetic with what we have been doing. Once we met, that's an interesting story, maybe some other day I'll share. But forest department initially were very reluctant because their planting agendas are very different. The species that they plant and their outlook towards actually the jungles are very different, or wilderness is very different. Here, but I'm very happy to say that forest department is now a partner in this. We get every several batches of foresters coming in and experiencing this restoration work and learning from it. So that way it is, there is a good collaboration now. And they are thinking of creating much more wilderness around in the cities or, patches which are of significance. So that is happening. In terms of In terms of other projects, I think IIM Gurgaon, with this project, IIM Gurgaon got several other projects. So we did 4 projects in Gurgaon. We are doing actually 4 projects in Gurgaon in larger landscapes. We did a corridor of about 5.2 kilometer mobility corridor for people who bicycle or who walk down to their work, and created a forest community around that walkway. Similarly, we did another drainage, which is called Badshahpur, which is now 3 kilometers. We have done another 2 kilometers is underway. There is another watershed that we are doing, which is Sikandarpur Pahadi. It's part of a seasonal stream. And we're also developing another biodiversity park just opposite this one, which is in about 200 acres. So many projects in Gurgaon. So because people appreciate this, what has happened here.
Yeah, Swati Sasrabuddhe ma'am wants to ask how Delhi people prefer this park over the other manicured parks in the capital city.
Yeah, I was not sure until recently as to how people are responding to this, because it had become, see, we don't have a website of this place. There was, IIM Gurgaon was only restoring it. They were not managing it in that sense. So there was no website, no information channels. There was, we had not put down guidelines for the visitors. We had not, created programs for the people. So there was a whole lack of, orienting people into this landscape. Other than, of course, people who are curious, people who are into biodiversity already in some ways, the JNUs and the Delhi universities and TERI and so on and so forth. But for the common masses, we didn't have a program. When I go through in recent times during Corona, this is what one did, was look at how people are perceiving it. And you saw that people do enjoy wilderness, people do enjoy wild spaces. And people have been liking it. One would imagine that they like open spaces like a lawn or like Sundar Nursery kind of, or Lodi garden type of landscapes where they can sit, relax, feel safe, and yet be in nature of some sort. But in wilderness, I think this is what is happening: is people are enjoying wilderness more and more. You can see that from Delhi, from Gurgaon, lots of people go into the Aravalis already, exploring for trekking, for just going to the water bodies, mining pits, which have become reservoirs. So there is a growing trend to explore wilderness, and this park gives an opportunity for people to look at that. So I think people are liking this wilderness.
Okay. Shivram Somasundaram, landscape architect, he is saying, thank you, Vijayji, for the wonderful presentation. During the initial stages of restoration, how was soil amelioration carried out for the large span of the large land area? And also, what was the source of water for the planted saplings? And the duration up to which the water had to be provided for the plants to establish. Similar question Deepal Lauti also has regarding how the water was taken, and also there was a water body on site. So were there any challenges to restore it?
So I think good question. We were offered by DLF. DLF is a big real estate builder in Gurgaon. Actually, it has made large part of Gurgaon and choked the drainage, choked all the wilderness, and created a city. They offered 300 trucks of soil, which we happily and very humbly refused, because everybody's question was, how do you plant in this rocky outcrop? So this question only arises when you don't explore the wilderness that's there in the Aravali landscape. So once you take people to the Aravali landscape, people start seeing that, these trees are coming out of nothing. They're coming from rocks. Look at Boswellias, look at Anagaisis pendula, look at Sterculias, even in central India or with western Ghats, dry parts of eastern western Ghats, you will find these species coming directly out of rock. So you don't need soil, kind of creating artificial soil setup. You have to bring in the right species in the landscape that is there. And that's what we followed. We got the right plant community in that rocky outcrop. And I have mentioned to you the different plant communities that we have got. Boswellia dominated, Anaresis pendula dominated, Mitragana dominated. In some places where there was alluvium, we had Butea and Acacia dominated. We had Saccharum and Phoenix savannas. So, and the second question is about how do you work on the soil? I think the vegetation takes over. You have to give little time. You have to let the shrubs and the ephemerals and the grasses to kind of colonize the landscape. Make it more healthy, make it more livable, and it's a journey that one has to appreciate. From one loved when it was open grasslands, and hardly there were trees showing up, and so this transition you have to enjoy, and it is this transition happens and biomass develops over time. And so in terms of irrigation, I think we got the water from STP plants, nearby STP plants from various these office complexes. They have so much water to share, so we got certain level of treated water and we irrigated the plants. But these plants don't need so much water. We irrigated them 8 times in a year. That's all. So like if you got one rainfall in December, you didn't have to irrigate till March, because anyway there is enough moisture in the soil, and dew also adds to it. And then you start giving in April, and then you may give in May, and then maybe one shower in June, and you help assist. But we were a little insecure that our plants will survive or not survive, so we kind of irrigated, or whenever we felt the need, we irrigated, supported for up to 3 years. But I'm reasonably sure now that you don't have to do more than 1 year. That was about irrigation. Any other question that part that I'm missing?
Yeah. From where did you get the water from? And there was existing water bodies, or were there any challenges to restore that?
So these are seasonal water bodies. So again, this particular water body that I showed was restored by was dug up by Atal, and he put a bentonite layer to it. I wouldn't say it has worked fabulously, but it has played the role of a seasonal water body, and that's how our water bodies are. They are seasonal in the semi-arid landscapes. They are seasonal water bodies. Unless they're a deep pit, and in this case, we only have one deep pit, which is on the extreme north end of the park, where you find perennial water. Otherwise, most of the places it is perennial. It is seasonal, and you get water in the monsoon, stays up to December, and then it dries up. So it has worked very well in that way. Also, the watershed has changed because this road is a big deterrent. All the water that was flowing into the landscape is no more flowing into the landscape. The volume is not flowing into the landscape. Now, Aravalis have a huge water potential in terms of getting the water into the ground. We have a calculated potential of about 20 lakh liter per hectare. So this becomes a big reservoir in terms of groundwater recharging. So one doesn't rely so much on surface water, but groundwater is very, very important to put in. And we do provide for the wildlife occasionally in the pit, some of the water holes that we have made.
Yeah, similar question from Bilemanan. Have you been monitoring groundwater levels during the process? Do you see a replenishment happening?
Sorry, say it again. I've missed this.
Yeah. Have you been monitoring groundwater levels during the process, and do you see a replenishment happening?
Yeah, so when we started the project, I think we were not sure whether we'll continue doing this project. Unfortunately, with a government project, unless you have a proper MOU, it is always iffy. What is the government wanting to do? So we have had instances where government is, some commissioner will come and say that, oh, now this is a big piece of land, let's create a science park here. Another person will come and say that, okay, let's have a crocodile crocodile sanctuary that how we have in Tamil Nadu, and so on and so forth. So people, you see this landscape as an opportunity for doing something that may not be part of the native wilderness. Now, in our case, unfortunately, we didn't do a proper baseline, and that's our biggest learning, that you have to tell a story, and for that, baseline is very, very important. Be it funnel, heavy funnel, or groundwater. So what we are seeing is that the groundwater is at the level. We do have borewells there, and we do. The levels of water is almost the same, because the extraction from the nearby region is very high. The extraction of water from the ground is very high. So that is not easy to infer. So I must confess that we have learned our lesson, that we have to do proper baselines. In fact, there was a study done in 2015 by Intact, IUCN, and Forest Department gave that study to IUCN to look at this patch and what can be done with this particular patch. Their interest was to do some of the medicinal plantations here. So they had got IUCN to do a study, and how we read was that they wanted to throw the NGO out, basically, and get the forest department in to doing something to meet their goals, and including the science city. So, but the report was so good that we started using it to showcase our work. And they say, the report, they got Intact to do that study, and we were very worried. But the outcomes of the report became a baseline for us in 2015. And since then, we have created 12 1-hectare plots, and we are studying vegetation and amphibians and relationship between different forms of life. Sorry, yeah.
Kumareshwari Rajendran is asking, how do you manage to get seed collection from the Aravali site itself? And how do you manage with the water needs, and what are the challenges in the succession phase?
So seeds was easy because you have to travel in the northern Aravali. You will get most of the species that we wanted, at least to get the pillars of our ecology in place. So there were species which are difficult to find and difficult to germinate, and there is not enough literature around on their germination and their propagation. So those were the challenges. Of course, we have documented how we have failed and how we have succeeded in some of the species. Some took us 3 years to germinate. Some we have still not been able to germinate. So there are those learnings. In terms of, sorry, what was the second bit of the question?
What are the challenges in the succession phase?
So the challenges are mainly, we still remove lantana, because the birds are big carriers for lantana, and blue bulls are big carriers for both Acacia tortilis and Prosopis judiflora. So they, as the land is connected with the Rajokari forest, so all the blue bulls and birds bring in lantana and Prosopis and Acacia nilotica, which are the major, and now recent trend of Subabul, Leucaena, is a big challenge for us in the park. In terms of recruitment, we are getting good recruitment. In fact, maybe we realize that the biomass is much more than what we would have liked it to be. So that's another learning, and I think in our new project we will be very, very aware of how the land will behave in 10 years and 20 years. So yeah.
Yeah, we have question from Shishir Rawal sir. Firstly, he says, thanks for the presentation. I appreciate your approach and questioning landscape architects' proposals. So many lessons for all of us. His question is, what preparation or actions were taken for restoration of abiotic, that is landform, soil, hydrology, etc. features, variables before planting was started?
So it is in terms of in terms of abiotic conservation, soil and water conservation measures, there were some swales made on the patches which were prone to degrading. See, in a rocky outcrop, especially which is mined, you have several pits. You have pits after pits. You know, you have there were JCBs running on the land. There were, you know, so I think before we came in, the forest department has done some of the plantings. They had dug up the whole hill with JCBs to making planters for the hill. So before we came in, they became big planters to get the water in. Of course, we didn't plant in those planters, but it became a ugly sight when we first took over. But there were some swales created but the grasses are fabulous. If your landscape is not the slopes are gentle, if you're, you know, this particular landscape does not have too much gradient, grasses will do wonders for you. So you have to be, even in the second landscape that we are developing, it is mostly grasses that we are looking at, and wherever there is a possibility of excessive water runoff, we are trying to create gully plugs and very, very little intervention, you know, in terms of abiotic measures, mostly through plants.
Yeah, Manjiri Mahajan is asking, did you have enough biomass to plant, or did you make some efforts to generate biomass prior to planting?
No, we didn't. We've just dug holes on the fissured quartzite and prayed that let these 6 inches Anogeisys pendula flourish. And I think grasses were, you know, and the ephemerals, they were taking over in one monsoon. Just 1 year of protection, they came back. This is a very active region, you know, in terms of you get, even if you get 500 mm rain spread over a larger period of time, then the vegetation is thriving, and we are very surprised how plants, you know, create this biomass, and these ephemerals, especially grasses and ephemerals, many perennial grasses such as heteropogons and panicums and you know, they chrysopogons, they lend themselves beautifully for creating the biomass. So whereas even if they were not there, I think I'm very reasonably sure with the experiences we have had on the rocky outcrops that some of these species are very, very hardy, like Boswellias or Sterquilias or Anogeisys pendula. You just have to have enough. Like the quartzite itself is not like granite. It has fissures in the so a large rock will have many cracks inside. So you create that opportunity for the plant to come in, and mostly it was there, you know. So you had to just dig up a bit, create a pit, and then plant a small plant of Anogeisys pendula or Boswellia serrata or Sterquilia or Wrightia, and you would see that the plant is doing very well without much support. So I don't know if I can say with confidence that, you know, we did anything special for biomass addition, other than the polybag had whatever support system for the plant.
Madhu Reddy is asking, could you share a bit on the actual plantation work and whether you had many differing opinions on how to go about planting?
So in planting, we were given lots of opinions on, and advice is free in India. So, and this was open to public from day one. So you had hundreds of people coming in right from day one, walking into that, because all those trails were already made and restoration happened after that. So you have to look at the end goal, because people do give advice on what to grow. And like I remember there was a SDM who came with 200 people trees, Ficus religiosa, and he wanted to plant 200 of them. And when you ask them, it's mostly from religious perspective, some dosh in their tipudi, birth charts that they want to get rid of. Then there are people, guerrilla planters, many guerrilla planters who come and plant. Then you have to educate them. Then you have to, talk about what you're doing, why you're doing, what is the ecology that you're bringing in, what are the plant communities that you're bringing in. So it is a painful process. It's not an easy process, and you have to, unfortunately, many a times undo what they have been doing. People don't. I was not so sure that on a rocky outcrop, the forests or these particular communities will do so well so fast. Like now, the canopy height of Boswellia patches would be about easily 15 feet, in about 7-8 years. And I hadn't imagined that this will happen, So I think by 2016, we saw a remarkable change in the landscape. Now, up till 16, there were grasslands. There were, mostly grasses thriving. And then from 16 onwards, you started seeing these robust tree species and shrub species coming up. So yeah. I don't know if I've answered your question, but I'm just sharing the journey. Yeah, people do advise, but in terms of us, we were very clear, reasonably clear as to what is the plant community or the forest types that we were bringing on different hills and the valleys.
Yeah, Piyush Seksaria sir is commenting that gorilla planter is such an appropriate term. Yeah, true. We have one more question by Pranali Kulkarni. Were there any interventions for the quarry pit restoration, such as landform modifications or hydrological structure changes and geological? And what were the challenges for the same?
So I don't know if you saw the picture that I showed. One of them was, two of them were quarry pits. See, there are quarries and quarries, depending on what rock you are taking out or what mineral you're extracting. Now, if you were looking at limestone quarry, it is very different from a quartzite. And in a large part of northern Aravali, mostly you extract quartzite or quartzite sand. So wherever it goes deep and wherever you are exposing the aquifers, then it becomes into a water body. But in the pictures I showed you, how vegetation has lent itself into, some we had planted, but largely have come on their own as well. Lots of species have come on their own in those pits and have nicely colonized those landscapes. So landform modification was not necessary for our restoration work, because these are not, they're not like limestone mines or a marble, the sandstone mines of Kota, of Jodhpur, where there's, you create these straight walls. These are not those kind of mines, yeah. So we didn't have to do any landform modification in our landscape.
Deepal has one question. What's the water source to the park present day, and whether the vegetation is in the self-sustaining mode or still need some watering?
So we don't irrigate anymore. We stopped much long time back now. There are certain pathways that we irrigate for fire, which is just as we have these pathways are now like fire lines. So we create 5 feet kind of a buffer of green wet zone. So that's the only bit we irrigate sometimes, only in the peak summer. Otherwise, there is no irrigation happening in the park. And the water initially during the planting was through STP, as I've mentioned before.
Okay, thank you, sir.